found out I had these tumors in my lungs, had my leg amputated. I went with my wife to the mortuary, to the cemetery, and to the church, and I planned my funeral. And because I do podcasts like this and I talk to people, in person about motivation and the need to keep moving forward, I actually got some brushback from people that commented that planning my funeral was in some way defeatist. And I had to, I remind these folks that the last time I checked, we're all going to die. I don't think anybody's working on a cure for life right now. You know, every one of us is going to die, but not every one of us is truly going to live.
So welcome, Terry. Thank you so much for joining the show.
Well, Camille, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you today.
I am too. I was looking at your site. I was looking through your million appearances. You have so many great stories. So I think we can have some great stories today as well. I always like to start the conversation with just knowing about my guest's past. What did life look like for you as a child? What did your worldview look like as a child? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I am the oldest of three boys. So I grew up
Yeah.
on the south side of Chicago. I didn't see my mother much because she was always running to the grocery store to get food for my brothers and I.
Yeah.
That's a bad joke. But really my parents sort of set the tone for us. They taught us the value of family, of loving each other, of caring for each other, and of supporting each other. And all my brothers and I were athletics. We're athletes. We played athletics from the time we were like 8 or 9 years old. All of us played in college. I have one brother who actually played for the Cleveland Cavaliers in the
Oh,
National
wow.
Basketball Association. So sports was really everything revolved around sports. I mean, my parents used to do what I call divide and conquer parenting, where it was I have a game on this night at this time. Well, my brother's got to practice at
Yeah.
the same time at another location. So my dad would go with me to the game, and my mother would take my brother to his practice. But
Yeah.
that was what we did. That was what our family was. And I'll sort of fast forward and give you a story. When I was a young man, I had a job. I was out of college, but I was living with my parents because my dad and my grandmother were both dying of cancer. And my
Mhm.
youngest brother was in high school. And I remember saying to my dad one night, Dad, I'm not going to go to Brian's game. He had a basketball game. I'm going to go work out after work. My dad's like, no, you're not. Like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I'm an adult. Yeah, yes, I am. I'm going, no, you're not.
Yeah.
And he proceeded to tell me, he said, our family is about caring for each other, supporting each other, loving each other. I'm
Yeah.
dying. Your brother needs you at that basketball game to support him. And my dad was absolutely right. I was just being a jerk, in terms of that. I really was. I was being, I was
Yeah.
trying to, okay, it's all about me. No, it's not. It's about the family. And so
Yeah.
I found another time to go work out, and I ended up going to my brother's basketball game to support
Yeah.
him because that's what our parents taught us from the beginning.
Yeah. So it sounds like togetherness, supporting one another was really a part of who you were, or what you were taught to value. Were there any other values? Was there anything else that you took from your childhood and your family?
Yeah, faith was always incredibly important. We were
Yeah.
Catholic. I tell this story, but it really is. It's a true story. So I'm six
Yes.
foot 8 inches tall. My
Yeah.
youngest brother's 6'7". The one who played for the Cleveland Cavaliers is 6'6", and my dad
Wow.
was 6'5". So we used to joke that if you sat behind us in church growing up, not a prayer's chance you were going to see anything that was going on,
Yeah.
in front of the church. But
Yeah.
that really was true. And we went to church. We were raised Catholic. My
Yeah.
brothers and I are still Catholic,
Yeah.
and it's worked for us. And when I was
Yeah.
in high school, my mother, well, I had 3 knee surgeries in high school as a result of basketball injuries.
Oof. Yeah.
And we lived in Chicago, and there was a Catholic saint by the name of Saint Francis Xavier Cabrini who started Columbus Hospital in Chicago.
Mhm.
I don't believe the hospital's there anymore, but there was a shrine to her. there, her bed, her table, kind of just things, her garments and things like that. And
Yeah.
so when I had this knee surgery, my mother every Sunday she would pile us into the car in the afternoon with my dad, and we'd go down to Columbus Hospital to the shrine.
Yeah.
And there was a gift shop there, and the gift shop was run by this rather large Italian nun,
Yeah.
and who had a great accent. But we never left that place without a bag of holy water, relics, prayer cards, and things like that that we didn't buy. The nun just gave them to us. It was
Oh
like,
my
here
gosh.
you go.
Yeah.
And I live in Denver, Colorado today, and coincidentally, St. Francis Xavier Cabrini had come to Denver and
Yeah.
started a convent, a church, and
Yeah.
it's very close to our house. So, life kind of has a way of coming full circle. And so, even today, St. Francis Xavier Cabrini is a saint that I absolutely pray to pretty much every day.
I love that, and you know what? That is such a fun synchronicity, and as just a personal note, I went to Seton Hall University, and one of our dorms was named Cabrini. Even though I didn't grow up Catholic, but I was like, "Oh, I know that one. I know about Cabrini." So I just wanted to point that out. I know a little bit something about something.
Sure.
So anyway, so going back to your childhood, so you had your family's Catholic faith, you had values around togetherness and making sure you're taking care of one another. Tell me about some pivotal moments in your life. I know that you've had several really impactful moments, several moments that probably might be considered, sad or just moments that would bring someone to their knees. Tell me about moments that changed your life and maybe started to change your worldview.
So when I was 15 years old, I had my second knee surgery, and they
Yeah.
took out. This was, again, I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but this is long before the things that we take for granted now, like CAT scans and MRIs,
Sure.
were available.
Sure.
They didn't have those things. So I
Yeah.
had first knee surgery. My knee continued to swell, and so their only option was, well, we'll do an exploratory surgery and see what we find in there. Well,
Yeah.
what they found was 25 pieces of my bone that had chipped
Ugh.
away, and they took those out. They put me in a cast from my hip to my ankle for the entire summer. And I remember the doctor telling me, well, your basketball career absolutely over. You might not
Yeah.
walk normally.
Yeah.
And I thought, at 15 years old, the only success I had really had in my life was basketball. And I
Yeah.
was like, who is this guy to tell me that I'm never going to play again? When I've never tried, when I've never even had the opportunity to see if my knee would support running and jumping and all the things we do in basketball. So I
Mhm.
remember when I had the cast removed, and oh my gosh, I mean, they don't do those things today. They have physical therapy and stuff. They
Yeah.
don't immobilize you like that. And I
Yeah.
remember when the cast was removed, I looked at my leg, and I imagined it looked like something out of a concentration camp. The
Yeah.
muscles had atrophied. The skin was blotchy and gray, and I,
Mhm.
I thought, oh my gosh. And it was literally, the doctor gave me a sheet of paper. He's like, here, do these exercises to try to get your muscle back. I'm like, I mean,
Wow.
today it's like, no physical therapy. No, no, you figure it out. You work it out. And I
Wow.
remember the Catholic high school that I went to, one of the brothers, there was a monastery on site. He gave me a key to the weight room.
Yeah.
And he said, you can use that whenever you want. And Camille, I used that key on Christmas Eve. I used that key after dinner on Christmas Day. On
Yeah.
Thanksgiving, I did. I was at the gym every day. Mom, Dad, great meal. Got to go. I'm
Yeah.
off to the gym and things like that. But that was okay. I'm not just going to roll over and say, okay, that's it. I'm going to at least try. I'm at least going to give it a
Yeah.
shot. Believe me, I was using that Mother Cabrini holy water and all that kind of thing every morning. I was giving the sign of the cross on my knee, and I'm like, come on, please let me
Yeah.
play. And I did.
Wow.
I got back to playing, got a scholarship to college. And
Yeah.
then I was going to quit. I was going to quit college. I went to a military college called the Citadel, and I was 1,000 miles from home. They shaved my head. I'm running around in Charleston, South Carolina, which is 90 degrees and
Yeah.
90% humidity, and you're sweating in the shower. And I'm like, I'm going to quit. This is ridiculous. I came here to play basketball. And I thought, I'm going to walk over and tell the coaches I'm done. Before I did that, I stopped at the student union, and I thought maybe I've got some mail. And I did. I had a letter from my father, and I took that letter and I went up literally to the nosebleed section in the field house. And I tore it open and I started reading it. And it was a 7-page handwritten letter from my dad, basically saying, I'm proud of you. I love you, but you need to pull your head out of your butt because you are
Yeah.
acting like an idiot right now. Because you have a full scholarship to
Yeah.
college and
Yeah.
you're going to give that away. You are so in your head right now
Yeah.
that you've called home 7 times and not once have you asked how anybody here is doing. You're so in your way. You're so focused on yourself. You're so selfish right now. You can do this, but you've got to make that decision. And that was a huge pivot in my life, a huge turning point. I mean, I was 50 feet away from the coach's office and quitting and
Yeah.
giving up a full scholarship. What if I hadn't have gotten that letter from my father? How different would
Yeah.
my life be today if that hadn't happened? And I to this day, I believe that was divine intervention. I believe that
Yeah.
was God acting in a way that, yeah, you're going to blow this if we leave you to your own devices. So we're going to
Yeah.
intervene here.
Well, I mean, it's that phrase I used to hear as a kid, God comes in the 11th hour, right? I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes it's right before you're about to make that pivotal decision. I would love to just hear a little bit more about that moment. Was it characteristic for your father to speak in that way to you?
No, no. And
No.
my dad loved us, but
Yeah.
he was not an affectionate person. I mean, we kissed him goodnight every night
Yeah.
before. I
Yeah.
mean, even when we were in college and that, but he was not a hugger or, I
Yeah.
love you, kind of. He showed his support by being there for you, by, let's
Yeah.
go outside and play catch or toss the football or play basketball. He was involved with us growing up, but we weren't a huggy, touchy feely kind of family. I mean,
Yeah.
we were all jocks. You didn't do that kind of stuff. I mean, we
Yeah.
were.
Yeah.
And but I had never received a letter from my father. I had never heard the
Yeah.
things that my father put in that letter. That was the very first time I ever heard him say any of that stuff.
That feels like a miracle. It really does.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, to use a big word like that, but I'm curious just how the rest of your college career went after that. You have this, it sounds like kind of a mindset change after reading this letter from your father. I'm assuming you decide to stay in school. How did the rest of that time go after that?
I did. I mean, by the time I finished the letter, I was literally in tears.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, you're right. I mean, talk about a mindset change. It's like
Yeah.
I have been so selfish. I've been so self centered that now it was, okay, I can do this,
Yeah.
And so I remember standing up, folding up the letter, putting it in my pocket, pulling out the handkerchief that every Citadel cadet was supposed to carry in their back pocket and,
Yeah.
wiping my eyes and going back. And 4 years later, I graduated. I played
Yeah.
basketball for 4 years. I captained the team my senior year. I played against Michael Jordan. I got to do some amazing things.
Yeah.
And even my senior year at the Citadel, I was elected to be the president of the Citadel Religious Council, which
Wow.
was really an organization that
Yeah.
helped people understand other faiths, other
Yeah.
religions, whether it was Jewish or Muslim or Mormon
Yeah.
or whatever it ended up being. And I mean, the Citadel is kind of in the Bible Belt,
Yeah. Yeah.
south and in that. So it was I learned a tremendous amount. It was a great experience for me. But
Yeah.
I used to try to go to mass every day
Yeah.
at school and things like that. Faith was something that kept me grounded.
Yeah, so two things. One way that I can tell that you are an excellent athlete is that you just breezed past the part where you said you played against Michael Jordan. That's how I know you're an excellent athlete, because you said that just like it was an everyday, oh yeah, and then me and MJ kind of, played ball, and then yeah, let me talk more about faith. So that's how I know you're an excellent athlete. I just want to put that out there.
Thank you.
Um Number two. So I really think it's interesting that you bring up this faith council that you are in, because I know for many people who have religious convictions or certain spiritual convictions, sometimes it's challenging to interact with people of different faiths. And I think this show is really for seekers and people who are considering what is their spirituality. Do they need to create a spiritual path? I would love to hear from you a little bit more about that experience, about being a Catholic, a devout Catholic, and then hearing different religions. Was that challenging for you, or did you find it comforting?
it wasn't as challenging for me as it was for the young man who was elected to be vice president
Oh,
of this organization. And I'll
okay.
tell you that story. So the elections were held at the end of junior year, but you didn't start until your senior year.
Yeah.
And it was, a couple of weeks before graduation and final exams. And it was a Friday night, and I was
Yeah.
grabbing a quick dinner in the mess hall, and I had a date that night. And the individual, I won't name names, came up to me who was elected vice president. He said, "I really need to talk to you." And
Yeah.
I said, "I got a date. It's Friday night. Can this wait till Monday or Sunday night or something
Right.
like that?" No, no, no,
Yeah.
no. Very important. Very important. I thought, okay. I said, "Look, let me go take a shower." I said, "Come to my room." I said, "You can talk to me while I'm getting ready for my date." And so
Sure.
the Citadel at the time was on an honor system. Nobody had locks on your doors, so you could walk in anybody's room at any time.
Yeah.
So, I go take a shower. I come back from the shower. I'm getting ready. And Phil, first name, I let that slip.
Yeah.
Phil's sitting there. And I'm like, okay, Phil, what's so important that you're going to make me late for my date,
Yeah.
on a Friday night? And he's like, "Terry," and he was a devout Southern Baptist.
Yeah.
And he said, "Terry, when the Jewish faith, somebody from the Jewish faith comes to you and wants to promote an event or, invite other people to an event that they're having, I want you to send them to me, and I'm going to show them in the Bible where they're wrong." And I was furious. I was furious. I was like, one, you made me late for my date. And two, that's not what this is about. This
Right.
isn't about saying who's right or wrong or whose God is bigger than somebody else's God. This is about understanding each other. This is not about passing judgment. And Camille, literally, every time I traveled for basketball and we were scheduled to have a religious council meeting, I
Yeah.
canceled the meeting because I knew he would be filling in my place. So I just
Yeah.
canceled the meeting
Yeah.
because I'm like, I don't need you with that attitude. And
Yeah.
I'm sure he figured that out, but it was like, that's not what it's about. It's about
Yeah.
coming together. It's not about being divisive and trying to pull each other apart.
Yeah, I really appreciate that because I think for some folks who maybe have had a experience like your friend where they're expected to fiercely, maybe not even go on the defensive, go on the offensive and tell somebody that their faith is wrong. It's comforting for me, and I think comforting for probably our listeners too, to know that there are people who do believe that we can coexist and we can actually work together and learn from one another. And with it, I want to know: was there anything that you took from the council, your time there?
Yeah, I mean, I got to go to different. I'd never been to a Jewish, to a temple and
Yeah,
seen, their services. I had never, I was pretty much locked into my Catholic faith. So
yeah,
for me, it was a growing experience. It was a better understanding of other faiths and
yeah,
how they saw things. And what really I kind of came away with was is as different as all our religions are,
yeah.
as human beings, as people, as really what whoever God you pray to
Mhm.
feels or thinks, there's a lot more similarities to
Mhm.
what we are than there is differences. I think the
Yeah.
same way in race and gender and things like that.
Mhm.
We are much similar than
Yeah.
we are different.
Yeah.
And that's really one of the biggest things I took away from it is that, okay, you believe in something that's a little bit different. Your rituals are different, your sacraments are different. Okay. But in the end, it's all about love and
Mhm.
caring for each other and how we take same things my parents taught us when we were growing up. It was
Yeah.
really those things just come to fruition more as an adult and in a religious capacity more than in just a family capacity.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I agree with you. I do think we have a lot more in common when we have conversation and we actually get the chance to calmly discuss these things. I know we live sometimes in divisive times, and it can be hard to have these conversations. So I appreciate your willingness to share your perspective and the fact that you have had the opportunity to interface with other people of different perspectives. I think that that's really beautiful. So we're around college time at this time. So tell me about a little bit after college and what life looked like for you. I know after college is usually a very pivotal and brings a lot of change for people. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, I was excited.
Yeah.
I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. I was all set to
Ooh.
make my mark on the world with my newly obtained business administration degree, and thought
Yeah,
I knew
yeah.
everything about business because I had a degree and realized I didn't know anything about anything, really.
Right, right, right. Yeah.
And and so I moved home to find a job. Again, this is long before the internet was available to
Mhm.
help people find employment. I found that first job in the marketing department at the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain.
Yeah.
That was the good news. The bad news was I literally slept in the same bed I slept in high school, stayed with my parents for the next 3.5 years as
Yeah.
I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer at the same time. And
Yeah.
so, here I was, I want to do my thing. And it was like, no, you need to be here with your mom because my brothers were off in college and things like that and weren't available. So
Yeah.
I mean, it was our life centered around the two of them until they died. It was 3.5 years of them slowly deteriorating, and eventually my grandmother died first, and then my dad died 18 months later. And it was, I didn't really date. I didn't have friends. I went to work. I came home. I would get at lunch. I would help my mom get my dad dressed. I would take him to his work. I would
Yeah.
then go back to my work, and then at 5 o'clock, I'd go get him, take him home. We'd get him undressed, put him in bed for the night, and
Yeah.
that was life. And
Yeah.
so it was. I wanted to be a police officer,
Mhm.
but my grandfather, my dad's father, was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954, was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury, he was shot in the ankle. But my
Yeah.
dad, who was an infant at the time, always remembered the stories my grandmother told of that knock on the door of Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with
Yeah.
us, your
Yeah.
husband's been shot. And so when I expressed an interest in going into law enforcement, my dad
He's
was
yeah.
absolutely not. You're going to college, you're going to major in business, you're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids, and live happily ever after.
Right.
But
Yeah.
but that's what my dad wanted me to do. That's not what
Yeah.
I was supposed to do. And
Yeah.
so again, I had another major life decision to make. I could have said, "Sorry, Dad, I know you're dying, but I'm going to go blaze my own trail in what I
Mhm.
want to do, or out
Yeah.
of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do." So my first two
Yeah.
jobs were in business, and I joke I did what every good son did. I waited until my father passed away, and then I followed my own dreams.
Well, at first, I have to say, I commend you for those first few years after college. That is a lot of work to have your corporate job, live at home, take care of dying loved ones, a dying parent. That is a lot of work for a 20 something. I think there's a lot of 20 somethings that would not handle that well. So I have to say, number one, I commend you for that. I would love to know if you're comfortable kind of talking about what that decision looked like. I know you joked that, after your passed, you said, "Oh, okay, I'm going to follow that dream." But what did that actually look like for you? I mean, was it an easy decision to go ahead and follow that dream? Was it truly like, yeah, once he's passed, I can do it? Was it that easy of a switch?
It, it was in a lot of ways because I never gave up on the dream. I never gave up on
Yeah.
what I felt my purpose was. It wasn't like I would never do it. It was always it's going to be delayed.
Yeah.
And I was a 37-year-old rookie police officer, which by most accounts is pretty old to
Yeah.
be getting into that line of work. But of all the things I've done in my life, one of the things I guess that I'm most proud of is that I never let the dream die. I never
Yeah.
got to a point where I settled, said, okay, I'm making good money. This is a comfortable
Right.
job. I'll just settle.
Yeah.
I never did that. I learned a lot in business. Don't get me wrong. I
Mhm.
absolutely learned a great deal that I think helped me be a better police officer. But at the same time, it wasn't like I couldn't wait to get up the next day and go to work. It was like,
Yeah.
okay, this is something I'm doing to pay the bills, so to speak, and
Yeah.
I'm helping my mom and that. And I ended up going. My second job was I went to work for the hospital that cared for my father and my
Y-
grandmother, and
Yeah.
was a hospital administrator for a while in that.
Yeah.
But it still wasn't my purpose, and
Yeah.
I. So yeah, it was, but it was something I was going to do. I mean, I
Mhm.
told you what my parents taught us about family.
Yeah.
okay, now it was my turn. My
Yeah.
parents had given up so much. If it would have taken 30 years, I would have stayed there for 30 years and done it because my parents gave it to me. Now it was my turn to reciprocate and help my mom and dad out during this very difficult time. I mean, I think
Yeah.
about my mother. In one
Mm.
bedroom, my mother's mom was dying, and
Mhm.
literally in the bedroom next door, her husband was dying at the
Yeah.
same time. I
Yeah.
mean, was it bad for me? Sure. But it was 10 times worse for her knowing she was losing those two people at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, I mean, to have that level of empathy for her, during that time while you're also deferring your dream and while you're also working, I'm assuming full time, that is amazing that you were able to do that. And I would love to know, once you were finally able to pursue the dream, get into the academy, become a police officer, did it live up to those dreams that you had? Did you feel like I've finally done it? I've finally become my dream?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, being in law enforcement isn't an occupation that I think a lot of people want to do, especially today. But
Yeah.
for me, it was what I was supposed to do. It was what I was put on this earth to do. And
Yeah.
it wasn't, I worked with guys that were, the gun, the badge, and the power and that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. That wasn't
Sure.
it.
Yeah.
It was about making a difference in your community. It was about helping people. And
Yeah.
yeah, you had to do some things and you see some things that were ugly and that
Yeah.
people shouldn't see, but it was about the people you got to interact with and make a difference in their lives when they were having probably some of the worst days in their lives. And
Yeah.
that's what I loved about it. That's what the purpose was. And
Yeah.
I yeah, the answer to your question, a capital letter yes to
Yeah.
was it what I thought it was going to be.
I mean, I could just tell by the smile on your face the way that you were just beaming as you were talking about it. That's how you know that was a true passion and a true calling, a true vocation, I think, for you to be able to serve your community in that way. I mean, the way that your eyes lit up. I know that that was a long part of your life. I'm sure there were probably some small moments during your time in law enforcement that were particularly impactful. Are there any that come to mind that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I did a lot of things as a police officer. I was an undercover, and you're going to laugh at this because I'm 6'8". I was an undercover narcotics investigator. It's like,
Oh my good. Okay, first of all, I have to stop you for 2 seconds because I have someone in my family that does the same role. So I just want to say we have that in common. At least I have a family member who's done that. So, but
yeah,
yes, 6'8" as an undercover. That wow, you were the tallest you see probably.
I was, but I never, I never changed my appearance. I never grew my hair long. I never grew a beard. I never did anything like that. And people, well, how were you able to do that? And what I always say is that industry, the illicit drug industry, and it
Yeah.
is absolutely an industry,
Yeah.
is motivated by greed.
Yeah.
So if you have money, you
Yeah.
will find somebody that will be willing to sell you drugs. And
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of what I did was I would sit on places, I would do surveillance, I would catch somebody that was going in to buy, turn them, flip them into an informant, send
Right,
them
right,
back
right.
in, do
Yeah.
a search warrant, kick the
Yeah.
door in, all that kind of stuff. So,
Wow, so all the stuff we see on TV and the
yeah,
and
exactly.
shows. Wonderful. Awesome. So I want to make sure we have time to talk about several other things in your life. Your book, your four truths, but I want to talk about your cancer journey because I feel like that is probably one of the most pivotal parts of your life and I want to make sure we have the time to give the space to that. So can you tell us when you discovered you had cancer? Was that during your police officer journey as well?
Actually, no, it was several years after I had gotten out of law enforcement. We were living in
Yeah.
Texas. I had a school security consulting business, but at the time I was coaching girls high school basketball.
Yeah.
Fortunately or unfortunately, our daughter got my height and was actually went to the United States Air Force Academy to play basketball
Oh,
and
wow.
is now an officer in the military. So
Yeah.
I was coaching basketball and I had a callus break open on the bottom of my foot, right below my third toe, and
Yeah.
initially didn't think much of it because as a coach, you're on your feet a lot. But
Yeah.
after a few weeks of it not healing, I went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine, and he took an X-ray and he said, "Terry, I think you have a little cyst in there, and I can cut it out." And he did. And he showed it to me. It was just a little gelatin sack with some white fat in it. No dark spots, no blood, nothing that gave either one of us concern.
Yeah.
But fortunately or unfortunately, he sent it off to pathology to have it looked at. And then 2 weeks later, I get the call from him. And as I said, he was a friend. And the more difficulty he was having explaining to me what was going on, the more frightened I was becoming.
Sure.
Until finally he just laid it out for me. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years, and I have never seen the form of cancer that you have. You have an incredibly rare
Oh.
form of melanoma that appears on the bottom of the feet and the palms of the hands. And at the time, I was told if I got a miracle, might live 5 years, but more than likely I would be dead in 2. So I was given a death sentence and thought, well, maybe I can turn a death sentence into a life sentence. And that's what I've been trying to do for the last 11 and a half years.
11 and a half years since you got that news. Wow. So a very rare form of cancer, form of melanoma, as you put it, that appears on the bottoms of the feet and the palms of the hand. Is this was he able to indicate if this is like a genetic thing? Is this just a luck of the draw thing? Do they know the cause?
They don't. So back in 2019, I had some genetic testing done of all
Yeah.
88 genes that doctors either know of or suspect cause
Yeah.
every form of cancer that we know.
Yeah.
And I have no mutations in any
Yeah.
of my genes,
Yeah.
which begs the question then, why did I get this disease? And
Yeah.
the answer is nobody knows,
Nobody
but
knows.
I've got it. So I don't spend a lot of time,
Yeah.
worrying about why I got it. And it's funny because the number of people when I got cancer, people were like, well, who do you blame? I'm like, well, what do you mean
Mm.
who I blame? Well,
Mm.
we're great about, especially in the West, about,
Yeah.
we got to blame somebody. We don't
Yes.
reach a goal. We don't take responsibility for it. It's somebody
Right.
else's fault.
Right.
And so people were like, you must blame somebody. You must blame your parents. I'm like, no, I don't blame anybody. And then when people find out I have a faith life, it was always, well, you must blame God. And I
Right.
used to joke with him. I'm like, I don't think God got up on a Tuesday morning, checked his to-do list, and said, "Hey, you have cancer today." I don't believe that at all.
Yeah.
But God certainly has given me the strength and the fortitude to continue to move through this
Yeah.
11 and a half year journey.
Well, I mean, you use the phrase, turning this death sentence into a life sentence. When you got that news, and I'm sure you probably took some time to process it, where did that switch happen? When did that switch happen? Was it immediate where you were able to say, okay, now I have this new journey, or did it take time for you to get over the shock of that news?
I mean, certainly there was shock. And my wife tells this story much better than I do. But when we had actually met with the oncologist at MD Anderson Cancer Center, the oncologist asked to see my wife out in the hall,
Yeah.
which I was like, what's this about? And she told my wife that, here's the deal.
Yeah.
If he gets a miracle, 5 years, but more than likely he's going to be dead in 2 years. How's she going to take that? And my wife just started to laugh and she said, you go tell him that. You see how he handles it. It was like, I know he's not going to just roll over and say, well, I guess I'll be dead in 2 years. So
Yeah.
let's go get the casket ready and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It was, no, let's see what happens. I don't, when I die, where I die, how I die, way above my pay grade. Don't spend a lot of time worrying about the dying part. I
Yeah.
remember, kind of fast forward through the cancer journey, 2020, in the middle of the COVID pandemic, an undiagnosed tumor in my ankle area breaks my leg.
Oh,
And I
my
end up having to have my leg amputated above the knee. And I have tumors in my lungs, which I'm still being treated for now.
Yeah.
And I remember about 6 months later, my doctor was showing me my CAT scan. And Camille, I have no medical background. I don't know how to read a CAT scan.
Yeah.
But you can kind of look at it and be like, well, that sure doesn't look like it belongs there.
Right.
So I had these big tumors in my lungs and I had fluid all around the pleural spaces on the
Yeah.
outside of my lungs. And I remember looking at my oncologist and saying, how was I alive?
Yeah.
And I will never forget this till the day I die. He put his head down, he shook his head no, and then he looked up at me and he said, I don't know because you shouldn't have been. Which said to me that God's not done with me yet. Like I said,
Yeah.
when I die, where I die, how I die, I'll let God deal with that. I'll spend more time worrying about the living. He can worry about the dying.
You seem to have so much joy and peace, even as you continue to go through what it sounds like active cancer treatment. You are still going through treatment 11 and a half years later. I would love to hear a little bit about the values, the ethos, do your four truths, does that help shape this? How are you able to kind of move forward through this cancer journey and still say, like, yeah, I'm still living. I'm still able to keep moving?
Yeah, I mean, somebody asked me one time, you were a college athlete, you were in law enforcement, you were on the SWAT team, you were a physical person, you did a lot of
Yeah.
physical things in life. How do you deal with that now that
Yeah.
you're in a wheelchair and you don't have a leg and
Yeah.
things like that? And my response was, when you can't do the things that you were good at,
Yeah.
you find a way to do the things that are important.
Yeah.
And I think that's what cancer has taught me. It's taught me a lot. It's taught me that, first of all, I don't think you really know yourself in life until you've been tested by some form of adversity. For me, it's
Sure.
cancer and things like that, but it's different things for different people. And secondly, cancer's made me a better human being because I've come to appreciate the things that are really important in life. And I've been asked, how do you want to be remembered? And my response is, I don't want to be remembered. I'm not going to be remembered. 50 years from now, nobody's ever going to remember that I was here. But what I want to do while I'm here is I want to connect. I want to connect with other people because I think that's what God wants us to do. Love
Yeah.
me and love your neighbor. That's
Yeah.
that's the overarching commandment. Do my four truths help? Absolutely. They
Mm.
they absolutely do. I call them sort of the bedrock of my soul.
Yeah.
And I just think they're a good place to try to build a quality life off of. And, when I found out I had these tumors in my lungs, had my leg amputated, I went with my wife to the mortuary, to the cemetery, and to
Yeah.
the church. And I planned my funeral. And because I do podcasts like this and I talk to people, in person about motivation and the need to keep moving forward, I actually got some brushback from people that commented that planning my funeral was in some way defeatist.
Mm.
And I had to, I had to remind these folks that the last time I checked, we're all going to die.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, it,
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's working on a cure for life right now. You know, every one of us is going to die, but
Yeah.
not every one of us is truly going to live. And I'll end with this. There was a Native American Blackfoot proverb that I heard years ago that I absolutely love, and it goes like this: when you were born, you cried, and the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. That's what I want. That's what I'm looking for.
Oh, wow. That is powerful. Powerful, powerful stuff. I'm trying not to be speechless because I have a podcast and I should not be speechless, but you actually made me a little speechless for a moment. All right, recentering here. So, I think it was right what you said about adversity, that you really don't know yourself until you face adversity. So what do you advise to people who are going through adversity right now and perhaps don't have a bedrock? Maybe they don't have a spiritual tradition or faith tradition, and maybe they didn't come from a family that really gave them a good basis. And they might be searching for, okay, what can I hold on to get me through this adversity? What would be your advice to them?
I'll answer that with a story.
Yeah.
Most of us know who Fred McFeely Rogers was.
Yes.
So, Mr. Rogers on his television show, Mr.
Yeah.
Rogers' Neighborhood, educated so many young people, including me, on his show. 2003, Mr. Rogers dies, and
Hmm.
his family is going through his effects, and they find his wallet. And inside his wallet is a scrap piece of paper on which Mr. Rogers had written four simple words: life is for service. I think we tend, especially when we get cancer or chronic or a terminal illness, that all of a sudden it's all about us now. Everything we do is about us. And don't get me wrong, I have bad days. When I go for my treatment, I cry, I get down, I feel sorry for myself. So, I mean, you're looking at me now. There's no S on my chest. I do not wear a cape and fly around with magical powers.
Yeah.
I have those bad days.
Yeah.
But when I do that, I find that I'm looking inward, that it's all about me. And I find a very simple way to get out of that is to go find somebody else to help. Go find somebody else to have a conversation with. I mean, especially if you're being treated for whatever your disease is, I can always find people at the hospital that are having a day that's worse than I am. So
Mhm.
I absolutely believe in finding somebody else to help. And the other thing I'll say is, and I learned this, for me, it was team sports. We're all on a team of some kind, whether it's our
Yeah.
family, our coworkers, our church. What I learned from team sports is the importance of being part of something that's bigger than yourself. You realize on a team that if you don't do your job, not only do you let yourself down, but you let your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, your parents down, etc. And if you think about it, the biggest team game that we all play is this game of life.
Mm.
So find something that's bigger than you. Find something outside of yourself that you look at that you can help make a difference in. And now all of a sudden, you're
Yeah.
not feeling so bad. I mean, I read somewhere that having a positive mindset can give you a 50% higher pain tolerance.
Oh, wow.
So think about that. I mean, instead of saying, woe is me, no, I'm going to handle this. I'm going to use my pain to make me stronger. And in reality, that's really going to happen because I'm going to have a higher pain tolerance to what I'm dealing with.
Wow. That's beautiful. Yeah, I think service is key. And I remember when I was at Seton Hall, we learned the concept of servant leadership. That's where I learned that. So I definitely resonate with that, and absolutely resonate with the idea of seeing yourself as part of something bigger. And I think both of those definitely intertwine. So I think those are both beautiful points. And I want to make sure that we talk about your book, because I do feel like your book is a beautiful act of service to others. Your book is called Sustainable Excellence: 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. What does it mean to live an uncommon and extraordinary life? Tell us about this book.
Yeah, I mean, there's an old joke that says when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So
Yeah.
God has never spoken to me. God has never said, Terry, you should write a book. But I think what
Yeah.
God does is he puts people in our path that start
Yeah.
to make the same suggestion over and over again. Initially,
Sure.
I didn't want to write a book. I'm like, write a book? Are you kidding me? I'm not an author. I'm not a writer.
Yeah.
But people started to give me the same suggestion, whether it was my mother or friends or something like that. And I think I'm smart enough that when a number of people start making a suggestion, I should sort of buck up and be like, okay,
Yeah.
I gotta pay attention to what's going on here.
Sure.
And so people were doing that with the book. And sustainable excellence is really born out of two conversations that I
Yeah.
had. One was with a former player that I had coached in high school who had moved to the area in Colorado where my wife and I live with her fiance. And the four of us had dinner one night. And I remember saying to her after dinner that I was excited that she was living close and I
Yeah.
could watch her find and live her purpose.
Yeah.
And Camille, she got real quiet for a while. And
Yeah.
then she looked at me and she said, well, coach, what do you think my purpose is? And I'll never forget it. I said to her, I have no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about.
Sure.
Finding the reason you were put on this earth, using your unique gifts and talents, and living that reason. So that was one conversation. And then I had a young man reach out to me on social media and from college. And he said, what do you think are the most important things I need to learn, not to just be successful in my job or in business, but to be successful in life? And I didn't want to give him the get up early, work hard, help
Sure.
other. I didn't want to give him
Yeah.
sort of the cliches. I wanted to see if I could go deeper with him. So I was taking some notes and kind of had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I was like, I got a life story that fits underneath that principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates this principle. So literally during the months that I was healing after I had my leg amputated, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and they're real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's how sustainable excellence came to be.
That's beautiful that it sounds like it came through, well, one, a push from the universe and God and the people in your life. I think you had that push, but it sounds like it also came organically out of your life experience and just all of the things that you've been through, right? It sounds like you are in this book. Your experiences are in this book.
They are my experiences or people that I knew of. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a saint in there about during the concentration camp time during World War II,
Yeah.
and the amazing thing he did about giving his life for somebody else who had a family. So
Yeah.
there are things that are in there, and I always say sustainable excellence was written by me but I think it was inspired by something that was much bigger than me.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in addition to sustainable excellence, how are you serving others? Tell us more about your business and how you like to interact with the world.
Yeah, my business is, it's kind of a start and stop kind of business because
Yeah.
as I said, every 3 weeks I'm at the hospital for an
Yeah.
entire week being treated for the tumors in my lungs. So
Yeah.
then I have a couple weeks off. And, one of the things I learned from my father when he was dying was the importance of having a purpose, having
Yeah.
something purposeful to do with your life, even at the end of your life. And my dad was in real estate and he
Mhm.
loved doing real estate. And he actually worked up till 2 weeks before he died. And I
Wow.
sort of tucked that in the back of my mind and said, when it's my turn in the barrel, so to speak, I need to have a purpose. And
Yeah.
so I started a public speaking or motivational speaking business just as COVID hit.
Yeah.
And then somebody reached out to me. And like so many other business, I was like, I got to find a different way to deliver my service. Nobody's doing anything either virtually or in person.
Yeah.
And this friend of mine reached out to me and he said, "Hey, why don't you come on and be a guest on my podcast?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Sure. What's a podcast?" And literally, I did. I was like, "I have no idea what you're talking about. What's a podcast?" He said, "Well, we have these conversations and then we put it up on social media." And Camille, I am not. I know it doesn't seem like that. I am a very private person. Putting yourself out there,
Right.
opening yourself up to, here are the warts.
Anyone.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't want to do that. And I remember when I started, so first podcast, I got post-it notes all around the camera, and he asked me a question and I kind of lean in and I read the
Mm.
post-it notes. I was horrible,
Ah,
terrible, terrible. But
yeah.
I wanted to be good. I wanted
Yeah.
to be good at it. And think about it, the first time you did anything, the first time you drove a car, the first
Yeah.
time you studied algebra, the first time you made a meal. Were you any good at it?
No.
Probably not. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to beat myself up too much, but I want to get good at this. So I've listened to every podcast I've ever been on. I want to have better stories. I want to not have all those a hum or
Sure.
and I'll listen to this one and figure out how many times I said during my conversation with you
Yeah.
because I want to be better, because I want to feel that the host and the people, the audience that were listening to us got value from
Yeah.
the conversation that we had. And if
Yeah.
that's the case, then this has been a good podcast for me.
Yeah.
If I can give something with a conversation with you to somebody out there who I don't know, and I'll give you a quick story. I had an email from a man about 3 months ago. And he said, "Tara, I just listened to one of your podcasts. It was amazing. It really touched my heart. I needed to hear it right at this point in my life." I'd never met this person. I said, "Great." I said, "What was the name of the podcast?" And he gave me the name. And I was like, "I don't remember that podcast." And I
Oh,
went back and looked. It was a podcast I had done 2.5 years ago
wow.
that he had found and listened to. So, the content that you're putting out now, it's evergreen.
Yeah.
It's going to be here 10 years from now, 20 years from now, even if we're not here. And
Yeah.
somebody may benefit from the conversation we're having today.
Yeah, I mean that is my hope, and I truly believe they will, just because I've gotten so many tidbits and so many great just points of motivation today. So I know others will too. As we're getting close to time here, I want to make sure that I ask a couple of the big questions that I always make sure I ask everyone, and then we'll make sure we let folks know where they can find you and where they can connect with you for more motivation and more connection. But first, I want to just kind of ask you about the future. What your plans are going forward. I mean, it's been 11 and a half years since you had that first initial diagnosis. You are still moving, you're still helping others. Are there any other goals or dreams, or do you feel like you've accomplished everything you want to accomplish?
I don't at
Yeah.
this point in time. I still think there's more for me to do. I
Yeah.
feel like there's more for me to do. I'm trying to write a second book. It's much harder for me because I'm on all these drugs and things like
Hmm.
that. But I'm working through that. I enjoy writing. I enjoy putting out my thoughts for the day. I enjoy especially talking to young people.
Yeah.
I just look at them and it's like, man, you are the future
Yeah.
of this country. You are the future of this world. And can I impart to you some things that I've learned?
Yeah.
Maybe you'll take them, maybe you won't. I don't have all the answers, but that's what I feel my purpose is right now. Put as much goodness, positivity,
Yeah.
motivation, love back into the world as I possibly can, and I'll keep doing that. And good Lord willing, and
Yeah.
until I take my last breath. So
Yeah.
that's really kind of what I'm doing now.
Yeah. And I know earlier you gave some really great advice about, if people are going through adversity, what would you suggest they kind of do to kind of find base? But do you have any other advice for people who maybe are just trying to figure out what they want to do in life, figure out their place in the world, or figure out their beliefs? Are there any other tidbits, any other inspirational pieces you can give to people who are just trying to figure out who they are and what they want to do?
Yeah, I would say that the most important thing that will determine where you go or don't go in your life is this one thing.
Mm,
It's the five people that you surround yourself with.
mm,
If the five people that you surround yourself with are making you smarter, are
yeah.
making you better, are making you have better character, better faith, then you will be moving in the right direction. Versus if the five people you're surrounding yourself with are always negative and it's always drama and it's always about them, then that's the way you'll end up in your life. So be very, very careful with the time that you give certain people, the ones you hang around with. And I think about this in my life. I want people around me that, like my parents, that love me, that care about me, that are willing, that love me enough that they're willing to tell me the truth,
Yeah.
even if that truth is going to hurt my feelings and may affect our relationship. But what do we do? Somebody says to you, Terry, you shouldn't do that. That's kind of a goofy thing to do. You're going to regret doing that. What do we do? Well,
Mm,
Bob, you're not my friend anymore because you're not saying what I want you to say.
right.
No, Bob is absolutely the type of people you want hanging
Yeah.
around you because he loves you enough that he's willing to tell you the truth, even if it affects your relationship. So I would definitely
Yeah.
say, be careful who you hang around with. Hang around with people that make you better. And
Yeah.
the other thing I would say is there's no such thing as the perfect fill in the blank, whether
Mm,
it's job or major or whatever it is. There's no such thing as perfect things. If you're waiting for life to come to you, if you're waiting for life to line up so that everything's perfect, life will never, it'll never do that. Life is
mm,
never going to get easier. You're just going to be able to handle hard things better. So if there's something you want to do, use your unique gifts and talents, figure out what you enjoy, and jump in with both feet. I love the
mhm,
quote from Nelson Mandela, the former president of South Africa, who said, I never lose. I either learn or I win. So
mm.
if you just jump in, even if you fail, and fail often, especially when you're young, fail a ton of times because that means you're doing stuff. Don't sit back and wait for life to come to you. Get out there, find the reason you were put on the face of this earth.
Oh my goodness, Terry! I feel like you took us to church, as us Black folks like to say. Oh, that was beautiful. And you know what? I appreciate you telling people to fail and fail often, because I feel like we are not told the value of failure, that how much you learn from failure, that it's not about just success, it's also about your failures. But Terry, I really, really enjoyed this conversation. And I appreciate just the positivity and the wisdom that you brought today. And the fact that even 11 and a half years after your cancer diagnosis, you were still putting out such good into the world, you're still doing service, and you were still inspiring people. I really, really appreciate everything that you said today. I really do.
Well, Camille, thank you very much for having me on. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Absolutely. And before we go, I want to make sure, where can people find you? How would you like people to connect with you?
Yeah, the easiest way to connect with me is I have a blog sort of slash website called Motivational Check. I put up a thought for the day every day, and usually with that thought comes a question about maybe how you could apply that thought into your life. I have recommendations for books to read, videos to watch. You can leave me a message. That's all at motivationalcheck.com.
Wonderful. I'll make sure that's in the show notes. Terry, thank you again for everything. I wish you so much luck and success with all of
Thank
the
you very much.
service that you give to the world.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Highly Spiritual Person podcast. I really hope you found this conversation inspiring and uplifting. If you did, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel for more updates. And remember, sharing is caring, so if you think others would benefit from this content, don't hesitate to share it with your friends and family. We'll be back with more exciting content, so stay tuned and stay curious.